be audible. There we go, and go to the main screen. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Daddy Chats Live. And here with me tonight is History Revealed and Tripp Ainsworth, both returning guests who have given up their bonfire night. Well, I suppose History's bonfire night's been given up. Tripp, I don't know what you're doing in November 5th in America.
I'm talking to a couple of British dudes about blowing up Parliament.
Yeah, that's nice. The American celebration.
Yeah, I'm the only one who sacrificed.
Yeah. Yes, sacrificed your drinking in the middle of a field watching fireworks, which is an odd tradition. The British, actually, no, the American, you do it on July 4th, don't you? Or 4th of July.
We do it on July 4th, and Memorial Day, and Thanksgiving, and Veterans Day. Sometimes Christmas, New Year's. Pretty much every federal holiday.
Any chance to blow stuff up? That's the most American thing I think I've ever heard you say. But yeah, guys, do you want to introduce yourselves? We'll start with History, because he's on the right on my screen. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm History Revealed, and on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, I make history and military-related content. So lots to discuss tonight about the subject at hand.
And Tripp, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm a Tripp. I'm a military science fiction author. I don't know. I'm here for shenanigans.
Well, specifically to talk about blowing up the British Parliament, which is the
yeah. Yes. And to be fair, YouTube censors FBI guy and MI5 is your domestic one, I think.
Yeah.
This is all for the sake of humor, and we're only talking about blowing up Parliament in Minecraft.
In a historical sense as well. Also, I do not have any suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, me neither. I'm very happy. I'm very happy with life.
I'm very happy. But yeah, so to start off the story of Guy Fawkes, or Guido Fawkes, is Spain, his time fighting in Spain. Who wants to take this?
With Spain.
Well, yeah, with Spain, yeah. He was fighting alongside Spain. I believe, did he fight against the English with Spain? I know he had barracks in Spain at some point.
So he fought against the Dutch mostly, and the English were backing the Dutch. Now, it was a very long war. This is the 80 Years' War. So at different times, that involvement was sort of at different levels. But it was the Protestant cause in the Netherlands against the Spanish, who'd been the Habsburgs, who'd been ruling the Netherlands. And if any English people fought, it was normally on the Dutch side. So the fact he fought on the Spanish side, given he was Catholic, he was fighting with his fellow Catholics, was very significant.
And
I also kind of think that it's a under-focused on or underappreciated era in history. Like, because people just kind of assume nothing cool is going on in the 1600s for some reason. But also the 1500s, 1600s was the era where you still had some dudes still in armor, but you also had guys with, flintlocks and, muskets. So it was that, it's very aesthetic if you look at the art, where it's like, oh, this is a knight with a musket. You don't see that besides in like that century-ish.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you think about it, at this point in time, you had it was 1643 when the last charge of the Winged Hussars against the Ottomans would happen. The largest cavalry charge in human history.
Bit later, 1683.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. Well, exactly. That makes it even point.
Yeah.
That highlights the point. Like, the Ottoman Janissaries were very lightly armored compared to what the Winged Hussars were charging at them with. And the irony of that being a Polish charge mixed with Germans. The few hundred years later, that alliance would change. But yeah, so obviously, when the peace treaty between the Spanish and the English, which I'm definitely not reading from the English heritage source as we go along to make sure I'm getting all the dates right. Yeah. But yeah, so obviously once James I of England and James V of James, it's James V of sixth. James
sixth.
Sixth.
V1 is 6, yeah.
Goddamn Roman numerals. But yeah, James VI of Scotland and the First of England obviously comes to the throne in 1603, and this leads to a peace treaty with Catholic Spain in 1604, which obviously upsets a lot of the Catholics in the British Isles at the time, which would have at this point been one big united kingdom. Although the merging of the crowns so Scotland was still its own separate entity ruled under one king. governments at this point in history are very, very confusing because you can have two separate nations with one head of state that was ruling both, but they weren't one nation. Which is the system we kind of have now, but it's like under one roof. The British Isles is very confusing. Yeah, and obviously this scampers any hopes of Catholicism being re-established in England, which has obviously been stamped out by Henry VIII when the Pope said he couldn't get divorced, and is the most petty reason to stamp out a religion in history. And obviously he then did a lot of naughty stuff to the monasteries in Ireland, which Henry VIII was not the best of all leaders.
Can't imagine why the Irish are mad at you guys.
Yeah, Henry VIII did some spicy stuff. We'll put it that. My favourite thing is, the English we sent over there are getting too Irish. We need to sort that out. Was literally Henry VIII's entire plot over there. Which was, and also he was somehow managed to score himself 6 different wives despite beheading 2 of them.
You'd think if he's gonna, alter the religion at all, he'd alter it back to no, I could just have multiple wives. So instead of lopping off heads, I can just have a harem.
I mean, basically did just over time.
Because if you're effectively the Pope of the English Church, which the King, kind of, then why not just change that rule too, and save the beheadings?
Yeah, I mean, he kind of did. He obviously preferred, he was clearly upset he wasn't getting any head. Was the metaphor?
Oh, whoa! That's the road we're going down. I've come to the wrong
Sorry,
history chat tonight.
It was there. Right, that'll be the worst. That is as much as we can get.
Well, it's either that or it's fire and blanks.
Right. Anyways, moving back to the story, and then I'll hand it back to you guys. So on the 20th of May, 1604, or May 20th for the Americans in the audience, a group of Catholics would meet in the Dog and Duck pub, which sounds like an amazing name for a pub, near the Strand in London. These men were Robert Catesby, Thomas Winter, John Wright, Thomas Percy, and Guy Fawkes. Mostly members of the gentry and all devout Catholics.
Yeah. So this is something very important to remember, that call it a rebellion or a plot, coup, whatever you want. Like so many others in history, it's the elites who are doing it. Yeah, this is coming from the top. These are not sort of peasants or low-ranked people trying to sort of topple the king and usher in a new order. These are people who were previously at the top, who were trying to regain their status and position.
It's the case with a lot of revolutions in history, apart from stuff like Spartacus, who is like the bottom, like a literal slave revolt, which is the bottom, which is one of the few times I can get behind a revolt and go, yeah, you did some war crimes, but I see where you're coming from. But most of the time in history, it's just elite on elite crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back down to you can say that any conflict is about like a land dispute or religion or anything like that, but at the end of the day, all of it is about money.
Yeah,
in one form or another.
Money is the root of all evil, as the good book says. It's not a wrong metaphor either. Yeah, obviously, Catesby himself was a veteran of another failed coup in 1601. And he became...
the first time? And the crown didn't kill him the first time?
You get a lot of that in English history, where either someone wipes out entire families to ensure they don't rise up, or they're like, we're going to put you in prison so that we look nice. That's the main...
Yeah, that doesn't seem efficient.
I mean, if you see, Mary Queen of Scots had, allegedly, because it's not proven how many plots she was involved with, there was 3 or 4 to put her on the throne instead of Elizabeth. Which is ironic, because the Scottish spent a lot of time plotting to get her off the Scottish throne, and then a lot of time to put her back onto the English one. Because if you ever want to look at sexism in history, look at the story of Mary Queen of Scots in Scotland, which is the story the Scots don't like to bring up. As someone who has Scottish friends, they don't like it when you bring that up. I sounded like every teenager ever. I have Scottish friends. Yes. So Robert Catesby was the driver of Fawkes, but Guy Fawkes was given the main responsibility, which is quite notably how he became the most known. Thinking of guideline words I can use, people who like to use terror to gain notoriety and knowledge of their actions, which is literally he would become like a symbol for idiocracy, I think.
Do you know why he was chosen, though?
Why was he specifically chosen?
Because that guy Fawkes.
This is what happens when you have to, honestly. There's no way.
Well, in this case, he didn't. He failed, but
yeah, in this case, he specifically didn't Fawkes.
Yeah.
So, ironically, his dad was a staunch Protestant, and his mother was the one who was a Catholic. So, obviously, he clearly was a mother's boy. He converted under his stepfather's influence, allegedly. I love it when they put allegedly in historical stuff. And he was sold a small.
Well, did Guy Fawkes post about it on Facebook? Because that would clear that up.
I get what you're referencing, and you could get in, if people knew what you were referencing, you'd get in trouble for that.
I don't know, and I'm happy I don't know.
It's an American. I'm not going to go into it. I'll explain it after. He sold his estate to the father had left him, and fled to the Low Countries to fight for Spain against his Protestant enemies, even though his dad was Protestant. Which is ironic. So he used the money his Protestant dad gave him to go and fight for Spain against Protestants. There is a certain poetic nature to that, I will admit. He became well liked and was a highly skilled soldier during his time fighting. And after this, the plotters, another of the plotters, Thomas Percy, was a minor member of a powerful Percy family, which is history revealed said.
Absolutely.
It's illegal.
One of the oldest aristocratic families in this country. Still, the Percy family still owns like land and estates to this day. Their descendants are still around and still very much nobility.
Which is a high point to going back to why didn't they arrest Robert Catesby for his 1601 plot? It's because it's hard to arrest nobility because you often get people paying. Like, is it better to say, okay, don't behead my family member because we'll just pay this money into the crown? Like, it's a corrupt system, which is why.
Yeah, but like at the same time though, that's also the way it is now. Like, depending on where you're at, it might not be, that family, but hey, my buddy over here, don't throw him in jail. Let's just have him make some donations to whatever charity, and he's going to build a fund for homeless orphans. So he's not a bad guy.
We've actually got a comment here from History Hun. And so when you consider Catesby's financial issues, losing his estates, etc., you can understand his resentment, which is very true. I think that fits well. Which again it's not they're not fighting for the common Catholic cause. They may put that outwardly, but they are entirely fighting for themselves. Percy family have links to historical English heritage sites, which the English Heritage has a link to all of the sites they own, which is Warkworth Castle, Soley Abbey, Prudhoe Castle, that's a brilliant name, Spofforth Castle, Warren Percy, which is a deserted medieval village, which has the Percy name on it. Percy's patron was his relative and head of the family, the Earl of Northumberland, which is how high this conspiracy went. Although officially a Protestant, he was widely regarded as a supporter of the Catholic cause. By October 1605, a handful of other plotters had been brought into the conspiracy. Most were members of the Catholic gentry. Among them was Francis Tresham, the son of Sir Thomas Tresham, a leading Catholic gentleman who built the remarkable Rushton Triangular Lodge in Northamptonshire. And then you have Thomas Bates, who was Catesby's servant. So now there was 13 plotters, which, if you are superstitious, obviously spelled doom. So we will go into the plot now, specifically. How much do we all know about the plot itself? I know this is where I actually have a decent amount of knowledge.
So I'll start off by saying why, in terms of the plot, why Guy Fawkes was chosen for his role. So the reason he was chosen was because of his military background, because he understood gunpowder, and he understood its use and how it could be applied, which is why ultimately, he was the one who was caught red-handed in the act. Is because he was the specialist in dealing with that. But Phil, you're about to go into more of the details about what the goal of the plot was.
This is mine. This is mine where I
But the other thing with that.
Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh no! Specifically, the reason it was put in barrels was because gunpowder by itself isn't explosive; it just burns. You need pressure to make it blow up. So he had it in however many barrels he put it in, right?
36,
so instead of
I believe.
Yeah. So instead of just one big pop, which might not work if you have a bunch of different barrels, they would be their own individual explosions that would create more destruction than if you just set the place on fire.
So, obviously, the actual mechanics of it, I'm not as au fait on. But the actual plot itself, I'm very good at. Because if you've followed me for a long time, anyone in the audience, you know that I have a little bit of a soft spot for Guy Fawkes. Because I don't have a very strong penchant for governments in general. Case in point, my favourite historical moment was when the Dutch literally ate their prime minister, cooked and ate their prime minister.
Ate him, yeah.
Good for them.
Yeah, I love the little silent "good for them" from Tripp. It's a very American moment. It's like, we wish could have done that. But so the actual idea of the plot itself was quite simply to eradicate the King of England and then, over a period of time, reinstitute Catholicism, which would be done via a revolution. So this wasn't the end goal. The plot. A lot of people think that the plot itself is the end goal. It's not. The end goal of the plot is to start a revolution. I believe take James's daughter hostage.
That's right. Yeah.
And then the Catholics would essentially lead a civil war in the country, which is eerily similar to what Cromwell would do later, except instead of religion, it would be what sort of government do we want?
But it also wasn't just taking out the king. Like if they would have done that right or got away with it, they would have taken out most of the government. Yeah. They wouldn't be fighting in a civil war against the state as much as you would have had different factions fighting in a vacuum.
Yeah, it would have been very similar to what happened in Libya once we took out Gaddafi, where the country just dissolved into different factions.
And the other thing was what you guys, England hasn't been invaded since 1060 or some shit. So
I think 1066 was when the last successful invasion happened.
Right.
So it wouldn't be proper invasion that was opposed.
Yeah. The French did try and invade again, but then there was a bunch of Welsh women on the coast who were wearing red outfits, and they thought they were redcoats, so they surrendered to the Welsh women.
Well, that's France for you. But the other thing though is it wouldn't be say in Spain or Germany or France or somewhere where, hey, we're having a civil war, all the neighbors are going to get involved. Since England's on an island, it would be harder for the other powers to get involved in
English. The civil wars on the British Isles as a whole are normally relegated. If anyone's going to help anyone, it's normally the Celtic nations against the single Germanic nation, or parts of Wales which have been anglicised, which is another contentious issue in the history of the British Isles.
There's the other point is though, in terms of intervention, is that the Catholic states were frequently intervening into Catholic areas where Protestants were posing a threat. It was much harder for Protestant nations to intervene on behalf of fellow Protestants. Sweden did it a bit later than the Gunpowder Plot and the 30 Years' War, but on the whole, the general power at this point lay with the Catholics. So if they were successful, no help was coming in from the outside.
Yeah. It would like we've all been saying, it would lead to total chaos. There's no way there would have been a cohesive without the Catholics in England at the time being able to very, very quickly organise. It would have fallen into complete chaos. You probably would have seen an invasion from Scotland because the Scottish would have been very, very upset that they're Scottish. Because people forget the Stuarts were a Scottish royal family. They were not English. The Windsors aren't English either, but we won't bring that up. Spacken situation. So, like, the Scottish would have immediately come in like very aggressively, and people forget the Scottish a couple of times did come close to taking English territory off of us in history. So, and England in complete disarray against a mostly, I believe, Presbyterian Scotland.
That's right. Yeah.
Probably would have like completely changed history. You wouldn't see a Catholic England emerge. You would see a British Isles dominated by Scotland, and I know a few people who would actually be happy with that version of history, to be fair. But yeah, there's no way this plot goes off, because obviously the actual plan that they really wanted was they wanted to install her. So they were gonna the plotters wanted to kidnap his daughter and then install her onto the throne and just hope that the rest of the nation went along with that. But the issue is as Tripp said, they've taken out the entire government, so there's no one really to recognise her.
Yeah, the other thing is that she was very young. I think she was 9 years old. So
yeah, it'd be fine.
Yeah. So what they could quite easily do is make sure she's brought up a Catholic and install a regent in the meantime who goes about the business of creating a Catholic kingdom and getting rid of enemies.
You would have seen something if they were successful. So take away the threat from Scotland, obviously, which the only link that the Scottish had would be the fact that James was on the throne, and like as we saw under Mary Queen of Scots, the Scottish weren't necessarily happy about having a queen over a king. It's one of the main issues she had in her reign and why she had to flee to England, which was an enemy state. So, like, if they are successful, you then have to look at the fact. I've lost my train of thought there from the Mary Queen of Scots tangent. What was I going to say?
We're moving into the plot.
Yeah, that was it. If they are successful, they have to that was it. That you would see a repeat of what Mary Tudor tried, where she that was it. That was what got me on the tangent. You would see a repeat of what Mary Tudor tried when she tried to completely eradicate the Protestant influence by burning people alive, as emphasised by the fireworks going off right now in the background. So you would see a complete repeat of that, which, as we all know, failed. And so what I think you would actually see would be an immediate counter-revolution, because the Protestant influence in England was so strong at that point.
Yeah, quite possibly. And I think what's important to remember, and a lot of people forget this about this time period, is just how strong the tensions were between Catholic and Protestant. So I can't remember the exact dates, but I think it was in the 1580s when you had the St. Bartholomew Day massacre in France, where the Catholics slaughtered the major Protestants in all over the kingdom of France, and that
1572.
Right, 15. Yeah. So even though that was 40 years ago, those tensions didn't go away, and so many Protestants saw Catholics as this demonic force who would kill them at the first opportunity. And because when England and then sort of the rest of Great Britain sort of became Protestant, it never really went back. Obviously, later on there was a bit of toing and froing with Charles II, but had there been a serious what's it called, like restoration of Catholicism, I think we would have seen something along the lines of the French, who just had the most horrendous civil wars over it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the continent, obviously the British Isles has a long history of battles between Protestantism and Catholicism. But if you look at the continent, the fact that they had a 30-year-long war, known as the 30 Years' War, which I have a strong case to argue that was World War Zero, or at least on a European scale. A lot of people argued the Napoleonic Wars count as that, but like the fact that tore up Europe on a scale that wouldn't be beaten until Napoleon came along. Like the 30 Years' War was so brutal, and it was ironically a lot of the Protestants were funded by the French at one point. It's almost like that they were desperate to get rid of the Habsburgs more than they were about the religion.
Yes.
What do you guys call the War of Spanish Succession?
We call it that.
Yeah, the 30 Years'
Oh,
War.
you do? Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you wouldn't put that as like World War 0.5.
There's a few candidates. It could be that one. It could be the 7 Years' War.
Yeah.
There's various ones
The
suggested.
7 Years' War is a very good one, to be fair. But by the if you did that list properly, by the end of it, we would have already.
We're on World War 10 or something by now.
The amount of global conflicts that have actually taken place is fairly scary. The only reason the two
Can
world
you
wars
imagine
are
the
so big
discourse in that? Like there'd be some American being like, "Yeah, we pulled you guys out of World War fucking 8 and 9," and you guys be like, "You guys didn't exist for World Wars 0 to 7." So
Yeah.
I think just going back to the plot, I think sort of the you have to remember that the crime that Guy Fawkes and the others committed was high treason.
Yeah.
You know, this had its own very special status where you would get hung, drawn, and quartered if you were guilty of this. And I can't remember the exact status of did James I believe in the divine right of kings? I'm not quite sure,
I believe
but
he did. James
he
I
did.
was a fairly eccentric king, to be fair.
I know his son definitely did, but I don't know if he personally did. But that whole idea of the king being sort of, you know, chosen by God was believed by people other than the king himself. So the fact that it was a plot against the king to kill the king was considered far more serious than just taking out the most powerful politician effectively in the country. It was considered like it had exactly religious elements into it, which means it was a crime against God as well as man.
Well, the other thing at that point, didn't England outlaw or no longer permit being drawn and quartered for religious purposes, but it was still okay for treason?
I'm not sure.
Not 100% on that either.
Yeah, because they used to burn people for religious reasons, so they were no shortage of imagination for punishments for heretics.
I mean, we burnt Joan of Arc alive for claiming she could commune with God, and we somehow twisted that as she was doing witchcraft, because how did she commune with God?
You know, but if she was English, you wouldn't have had a problem with it. I think it was really just because she was French.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, that was the English and the French have a very good way of going, oh, we're doing this reason, but it's actually because we want to take out the French. So yeah, following on with the plot. So the Houses of Parliament during the 17th century or the 1600s are completely different to what they are today, where there's obviously a lot of armed security. It's very hard to get into. But a lot of those, a lot of the buildings in the Houses of Parliament were being added between the 12th and the 17th centuries. And obviously with constant construction going on, in fact, there was the Lords met in a large room built in the 13th century, which was the Queen's as the Queen's bedroom. And it was one of the dark rooms underneath it that Fawkes placed the barrels of gunpowder. Now, because again, as I was saying, because there was constantly building stuff, and London at this time was filled with markets and stuff like that, they quite literally just walked the barrels in.
Also, though, wasn't it a kind of a point of contention in the plot when to do it? Because at the time, London only had a couple thousand people in it, and it was known for being dirty and having or getting a lot of the plague. So a lot of people in Parliament didn't hang out there. They hung out where they were from and only came in at certain points to hold sessions.
That's why they specifically chose the opening of Parliament, because there's as you say, there's very few times that everyone is gathered in. Even today, Parliament is very, very rarely has everyone gathered in. The opening of Parliament specifically requires the presence of the king.
Yeah.
And so the key person they want to take out is the king. And then obviously moving on from that, who wants to take how the plot was foiled? Because I do.
I'll take that. Although there are still many unknowns.
Yes,
so of course, so I think a really interesting question is who sent the letter, because an anonymous letter was sent revealing the plot, and it was from this letter that do you know the exact details of what was in the letter? Was it time and place?
I have the letter in front of me.
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll read it out. So the letter itself said, "My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care of your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift off your attendance at this Parliament. For God and man have concurred to punish the wickedness of this time. They shall receive they shall receive a terrible blow this Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them."
And since we don't know who that's from, it's kind of been funny in literature because, historical fantasy writers will take that and run it in every direction, where it's like, well, was this someone that was like part of the plot that was thinking about backing out? Was this somebody's wife that like didn't want that person there to, fall victim to it?
So the name that's most commonly put forward is Sir Francis Tresham, who sent the letter to Lord Monteagle.
Yeah. Why do you think it was him?
They don't actually give an answer. I believe it's Catesby, because Catesby's been foiled once before, and so like law of averages, it's going to be the person who's already failed one plot. But they don't actually give a solid reason.
He also
here we go.
He also knew these guys, right? So he could have written it himself to gain favor the crown afterwards. Because after he brought the letter forward, didn't he get like a 500-pound stipend for the rest of his life after that?
So, I don't think so. I think every single member of the plot was actually killed in one way or another.
No, the guy that received the letter.
Oh yeah, received the letter. Yeah. He was like, yeah, I'm sure. So it turns out, Francis Tresham was Monteagle's brother-in-law, which that actually does make sense as to why he'd be like, my sister's not going to be very happy if I kill her husband. I can see why.
So how did he know? How do we think he knew about it?
Sir Francis Tresham?
Yeah, how did he know about the plots?
He was in the plot. That's what I said.
Sorry, no. But he, what happened to him? Sorry.
So Francis Tresham, was done pretty much the same. He wasn't as brutally taken out, but he definitely. Well, allegedly, he was one of the strong contenders to have written the letter to Monteagle.
So he still got executed?
Yeah. So
the thought is that he sent the letter thinking it would maybe grant him some favour, but in the end it made no difference?
Well, the way it's being put forward, and the way I was always taught that the letter was put forward, whoever sent it, the idea was clearly that they had someone that they liked in the Houses of Parliament at the time, and they just didn't want that one person to get hurt. So. Right. I think they sent a letter genuinely believing that whoever read that wouldn't immediately go, "Oh wow, I can gain favour with the king if I read this out to him," and they hoped that they just wouldn't.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so like it was Monteagle, right? So they were thinking, oh, maybe Monteagle will just, I don't know, accidentally have a stomach ache or need to go hunting today, or look, I was gonna go, but I have to go grab eggs and milk.
Yeah.
Can't go. Hey guys, sorry.
It's literally the 17th century English don't go to school today, like text.
Yeah, I mean there are some parallels, I think, to Julius Caesar's assassination, where various people were sort of quietly warned, maybe it's best you don't go to the forum today.
If only he had listened as well.
Yeah. Well, how much of that though is apocryphal?
Well, we don't. Also, the variety of sources disagree. It's hard to know.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I've seen people agree is he spoke Greek when he passed away. When he was stabbed, he didn't speak Latin.
Well, from what I've heard, they don't even agree on that, because another source says he didn't say anything.
He probably said, "Ah!"
Yeah, there is a likelihood he was like,
Yeah, because doesn't most of that come from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar?
The whole,
right,
yeah.
Et tu Brute, Shakespeare.
Yeah. But Shakespeare is responsible for a lot of historical myths. On the night of the 4th of November, King James ordered a search of the Palace of Westminster, headed by the Earl of Suffolk. During their search, they came across Guy Fawkes in the Undercroft, which I'll let history take up, because this is the funniest bit of it all.
Well, the fact that they caught it. I can't think of any situation in history where someone has been caught more red-handed than he was. The barrels were ready. He had the light in his hand, didn't he? In his hand. and well, I would like to think they quietly said, "It's like, sorry, mate, but it's game over but it was probably a lot more violent than that. And how long was the fuse set for? Do we know how many minutes before he got out?
I don't know. I have looked this one up to try and actually get it, but we don't know. There is a good chance that he was very much planning to not make it out of those tunnels.
Oh, okay. So, well, one way.
Even if he wasn't, or even if he was planning on dying down there with them, if you wanted all the barrels to explode at the same time, the fuses would have to be several feet long to allow, the fire to burn to it. So whoever came in down with them could be like, oh, like maybe he could have even lit in the fuses, but it's like, well, they're not going to blow up for a couple of minutes. Just yank him out.
To my knowledge, he didn't manage to light the fuse.
Yeah. He had a fuse. He had a fuse, and he famously had a small lamp. And if you see lots of images of him, you can see him carrying the lamp that he used to sort of move through the darkness. That's a sort of enduring image of Guy Fawkes.
And he wouldn't. That's a sort of a explosive Diogenes in a way. It's the same symbolism that's used for Diogenes, but very, very differently. So yeah, during their search, came across Guy Fawkes and Undercroft, and they left, but soon learned that the space was being rented by Thomas Percy, which added to their suspicions. James ordered a second search headed for by Sir Thomas Knivett. I understand how Americans struggle with English names because we just put syllables in and we're like, go for it. Sometime around midnight, perhaps in the early hours of the 5th, Knivett went back to the Undercroft, poked around the firewood, and found gunpowder. He arrested Fawkes, who had fuses with him, and a warrant was issued for Percy's arrest. Yep. And then we go into Guy Fawkes was immediately questioned, and even King James interested himself with the case and his process. I wonder why King James was interested in this case.
Yes.
I wonder. Yeah. Also, I like how it's like he was immediately questioned, not immediately put on a rack and.
I think they scaled up the methods, shall we say? So they started off with what was can I use the T word or not?
It is YouTube,
I won't do.
Interrogation under duress.
Yeah, exactly. So they started with what was considered the more gentle methods, and then eventually scaled up to the rack. But James actually admired Guy Fawkes because he didn't buck. Am I right in saying he didn't buckle under the duress he was put under? Or he did, but not to the extent that they wanted.
Yeah,
he treated it like a good back cracking, a good massage on the vertebrae.
Yeah, to
this actually feels nice.
It's very funny that I can actually get away with saying the T word on an actual video, but in live, so it'll be more spicy.
He got Guantanamo. Got it.
Yeah, he was questioned in a spicy meaning, and so
and it wasn't just Jason from Spanish.
He did some BDSM without permission.
Whoa!
Can we get away with that? But to put it politely, he went under a lot of pain, and then to the version of the story I grew up with, he signed the confession, like when he actually finally broke and he couldn't take any more, he signed the confession like it was barely legible. It was worse than the doctor's handwriting because his hands were not functioning. The signals weren't going to from his brain to his hands because they'd questioned him under duress so much that he physically couldn't write. So to my knowledge, he didn't give up the conspirators until the last second, which ironically signed his unaliving warrant because that was it. That was the only thing
we have two signatures from him, and that's one of them. The other one was from sometime when he was in the fight with the Spanish.
I can't show you guys, but I can show the audience by flashing up on screen.
Yeah.
We actually
have
the
his
first
signature
there.
Well written. It took his time.
And then
we can read it.
Then we have the second one I'm looking at now is it's ineligible. I don't know how it's compared the same. Here we go. We've got a few more comments from History Hun. I'm annoyingly vague about Elizabeth. I read there were plans to use her as a puppet monarch, and other historians believe they might have had something more malicious in mind, which changes the tone. I believe that was in reference to when we were talking about the plots from Mary, Queen of Scots. earlier. And she also said he sent it to warn his family member not to attend that day. There are theories that some politicians knew about it, but were allowing it to almost play out as they believed James was being too lenient on the Catholics. So
Interesting.
You've got both sides sort of hoping for a religious war, really.
So hold on. So what you're saying is the gunpowder plot was an inside attack? It's a false flag attack.
It's a false flag. It was Operation Northwards.
What the elites told you to know is
Operation Northwards
they were
was real, by the way.
That was real. That was real. What's particularly interesting about that is that after Mary I, pretty much every English and then later British monarch was accused of being too sympathetic to Catholics at some point.
Yeah.
So James was no different, and it was suspected that Charles I was a closet Roman Catholic. Yeah. And then, of course, his son, Charles II, converts on his deathbed and confirms every suspicion that everyone ever had about him. And then James II was openly a Catholic, so no one could accuse him of being a secret one because he was an open one, and that caused a second civil war in that time.
It's something that wouldn't be closed up until the James II. I believe it was James II that was exiled to France, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
and
that,
William III and Mary the Second took over.
Yeah, which would lead to the Scottish being very unhappy with the state of affairs.
Yeah, and that's something that's bled over here. Like, we've only had 2 Catholic presidents, and one of them was JFK, and you saw what we did to him. And then the other one was Joe Biden, and it was like, do we want Biden or Trump?
Okay, we're gonna divert the question from that. I can see the comments on the video straight away.
Those more Catholics, not politics.
Hey, you want engagement on the video? Then you've got it.
That's true. Yeah. That's the one way. Just like, so what are your thoughts? Who's better? No, I'm not going to make that joke. I can't get away with that. I make spicy jokes on YouTube.
Well, obviously, it's.
So, anyways, my opinions on this. No, I'm joking. Thanks to Guy Fawkes' confessions and information from various intelligence networks, investigators uncovered the names of the other plotters and quickly moved to arrest them. Most fled to the Midlands, where they tried and failed to rouse an uprising. Which respects
real quick. Where is the Midlands? I'm not
in the middle.
It's literally so if you've got like Cornwall there, the north there, and then above there's like Scotland. That's the Midlands. Yeah. It's like Manchester and stuff like that.
That's like way down south.
I try to think at the time. Birmingham, I don't think was anything significant at all. So that would be Warwick,
like
area.
Warwickshire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Warwick and Worcester, I think, were the significant towns at the time. I can't.
What's also funny is the Midlands, the North, and the South depend on who you're asking.
Of course.
And I learned this from a Welsh friend recently that the Welsh disclosed that completely different to the English. The Welsh have a very strong North-South divide, which has its own history.
Of their own, yes.
That history actually goes back to Rome. The North-South divide in Wales goes back to Rome, which is. Yeah, a lot of history. Like I say, my description of the British Isles being a floating Balkans is like I think it's accurate.
Well, I mean, I was just asking because, like over here in America, we got our naming conventions, from the English, and our naming conventions are all kinds of screwed up. So, yeah, I'm just wondering if you guys are the same or something that we fucked up over here.
Welsh town names are my favorite because I can't say most of them.
Yeah, you're supposed to. Did anyone tell the Welsh you're supposed to have vowels in words?
I dare you to say that to. I would dare you to go into.
I'm not asked.
Go to the middle of Wales and shout that in Cardiff City Central and see what happens. But yes, so obviously on the 8th of November, a core group of 8 plotters made the last stand at Holbeach, a Holbeach house in Staffordshire, but against a force of 200. They stood no chance. Well, the Greeks would argue against that because they beat the Ottomans with similar numbers, numerical differences. Most were unalived or wounded. Catesby and Percy were both hit by the same bullet, and they died from their wounds. The survivors were arrested, and all remaining plotters were rounded up and put on trial.
Double kill, got it.
Yeah. But something quite cruel about bullets in those times is they rarely killed you immediately. The nature of them was that sort of they wounded you and then you died later. Gangrene was a real fun thing to get. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what eventually got Henry VIII, wasn't it? Gangrene.
Was it?
Yeah, no, it was.
He had all sorts though.
Yeah. Not just that, but a bit of a noncery to him. People forget that one of his wives was literally 15 years old.
Yeah, but that was like 500 years ago.
Yeah,
People just did that back then, right? I mean, like he totally wouldn't have gone to Epstein's Island.
At the time, a lot of people argue like the young marriages, but a lot of those marriages are either never consummated or they just never happened. Like obviously they saw adulthood as like 14 sort of thing, but also it depends on culture, where in the world, and obviously what time. But the child marriages that are portrayed from medieval Europe. Thank you for the background noise. The people out doing fireworks outside. A lot of those child marriages aren't as common as they are. If they do happen, it's entirely for political reasons rather than
yeah. I was about to say,
true.
isn't that most of that? Is it most of that in the aristocracy, where if you're just like regular Joe Schmo peasant, you hook up with other Jane Schmo peasant.
A lot of
exactly.
This was something like we often see the Romans as a very like promiscuous, degenerate society, but for majority of people, it wasn't like that. They were a lot more religious. What we get is the image of the upper classes, the aristocracy, the senators, like those people, because they've got the money and power. What do you do when you have all the money and power? Like
you do something else because like you need some like. Not to get too off topic, but like and this depends on when and where you're at, but like a lot of Romans that like weren't upperclassmen, they would only do the horizontal hustle like in the dark, and half the time they'd keep half their clothes on.
Yeah, well, you needed to get back to work in 5 minutes, didn't you? Like,
that's true.
And you was also probably hiding from the people who owned you.
I'll tell you. Sort of going back to the topic at hand.
Back to the topic. Sorry, I'm doing something.
It's all right. I think sort of like the celebration that we continue to participate in to this day is like it can't be misunderstood or overlooked, should I say? The relief that this didn't happen, I think it's carried over from the time. There was a real sort of Protestant feeling. Thank God the Catholics failed. Thank God we're not under the thumb of Rome once again, and that's why that celebration was. We still celebrate it. We're over 400 years on now, and it was so significant. And obviously, it's taken on other forms now. I think most people don't even know that. There are obviously anti-Catholic, not sort of not bigoted, but just sort of like it prevented Catholicism coming back.
Yeah, I mean, at one point we was burning effigies of Guy Fawkes when that's like died down in recent. I remember doing it as a kid, but in recent years it's disappeared.
I've seen people do it.
Is it still? It depends.
But like any other holiday, though, like it's less about what the holiday is about, whether it be Christmas and the birth of Christ, or Memorial Day and honoring the dead. It's about getting drunk and yelling at shit.
Yeah. Or in this case, fireworks as well.
Yeah.
Getting drunk and blowing shit up, like this is like your most American holiday, man.
But down south, like where I am, and to not dox myself too much, be very, very, very careful what I say. Like the Guy Fawkes effigy burning stuff, like disappeared about started whimpering out about 50 years ago. I'd say now it's very rare you'd see it.
50 or 15.
Like 50 years, like 50 odd years ago, I'd say it started disappearing down south. Like
everyone's gone boring.
Yeah, the South is very.
Wait, did you guys cancel Guy Fawkes?
Well, technically we cancelled it. Technically we cancel him every year, but it's just the burning. Like I know the further north you get, the more like traditional bonfire night becomes. But you have to.
I think in life is just more traditional. I think the further north you get.
Yeah, and then it
but also
then it
Celtic holidays, fires are a big thing. So like if you're a more Celtic culture up there.
Yeah.
Like in Ireland, like Halloween isn't as much trick or treat and is more we're gonna have a bonfire and we're gonna get drunk and we're gonna blow something up.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like the South is is a lot more like modern, multicultural. Then the north gets more traditional. Then you have the lowlands in Scotland, which sort of like semi-revert to the Midlands, and then you have the Scottish Highlands, which is ultra traditional.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry, carry on. I interrupted your what you were saying. Just before I started talking about the Guy Fawkes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd like to ask you, Steve, why do you think that Guy Fawkes has become, and I appreciate the film V for Vendetta has a lot to do with this, but why do you think he's become a sort of anti-authoritarian figure in the way that he has, as we've discussed? Now, I know lots of people gain reputations that don't really match up to their historical sort of timeline, because, of course, as we said, he was part of the gentry. He was anti-authoritarian only in the sense that he wanted to be the authoritarian, and it was someone else.
So the reason I can answer this perfectly is someone of the without getting cancelled, someone of the "don't tread on me" persuasion. Like Guy Fawkes' actions against the government of a government that, as at the time, whether we like it or not, there is like ironically people saying they were being too lenient on Catholics. The English government at the time was pursuing a policy of oppressing the Catholic population. There's no way around that. And obviously, someone from my perspective, who, if you like, for everyone who like maybe newer to the channel who hasn't seen, I'm very much support the people who like freedom. Like I don't like governments controlling it. I obviously understand the further back in history you go, the more control government's needed. But like as time goes on, you see freedom start to appear and stuff. So anyone that's like doing any sort of oppression, I dislike. It's the idea of government as a whole. You want minimum government. So the reason that Guy Fawkes has taken on this almost folk hero status on one side and this absolute monstrosity on another is entirely down to perspective. One, he was trying to fight a religious war and was a terror spaceist to circumvent the algorithm. And on the other side, he was fighting for freedom. So from my perspective, like, yeah, I don't like that he wanted to essentially start a religious war or a religious crusade, but I do like that he was going against the government. And I think for many people who don't like to take as nuanced an approach as I like, the issue we have today is nuance is sort of taken for granted, and people tend to ignore it. So you either hate him or love him. And I think the reason he's become so popular, especially with V for Vendetta, is because he's become a symbol against oppression, which, as you say, is a fairly stupid look at him, because he just wanted to become the oppressor. The same as Cromwell did when he was a Puritan and he was oppressed. He immediately got into power and started oppressing everyone else.
Which is, by the way, the story of much of humankind, is that, you know, those who are once oppressed end up becoming the oppressors, and those who are oppressed those who are oppressors become oppressed. I mean, that's it happened with Catholics and Protestants, and it happens all the time, all over the world.
Yeah. And like the folk hero thing, like that's the same thing with like William Wallace. People forget that he was a nobleman. A lot of people think he was a dirt farmer that just one day woke up and said, "I don't like England. I'm gonna go stab him." It's like there's a lot more to that, but we just remember, I don't like England, I'm gonna stab him.
He committed a lot of war crimes.
Yeah, and forced a lot of people to fight for him. I think for me that's a really important part of him that's overlooked, is that the idea he was a popular hero who people wanted to follow. Well, actually, a lot of people didn't want to follow him, but he forced them to follow him.
There's a reason Robert the Bruce ignored William Wallace for a lot of it. Like, he let William Wallace go off and do his thing, and then he went, "Oh, that guy was awful. Maybe I should lead Scotland."
Yeah.
William.
But I mean, same kind of like folk hero, like I don't know, mythology to it. We're gonna take the part we like about the narrative that we like, and we're gonna ignore this part of it.
It's the same as Robin Hood. Robin Hood, like, if you think about it, isn't an amazing hero. It's just the perspective. He's fighting against the local government. In the end, he's still, going off and like unaliving innocent soldiers who were just doing
I mean, I know he probably, am I right in saying that he probably was several people?
It depends on which version of the story you read that was written when and by who.
Yeah.
Very similar to King Arthur.
Yeah.
A million people wrote about doing a bunch of things.
With King Arthur, though, I will say that we do have solid versions of the story, but they're all Welsh. If you look at the English versions and the French versions of the story, that's very far from the truth. The Welsh version is still mythologized, We don't have any straight up sources of Arthur. We know that he may have existed and he may have been a Roman nobleman who helped fight off the Saxons, but the only source we have solidly for Arthur is from Wales.
Which I think tells you a lot about history, because the English and French stories are much better than the more historically accurate ones. They're really good.
Yeah.
There's a reason sort of Arthur's legend took off.
Yeah.
And it's
that
not
was a
it's
fun
not
way of saying the English version's better than the Welsh version. Deal with it.
I mean,
Yeah.
the English kings, a lot of English. I think the reason that King Arthur is associated with England rather than Wales, even though it is a Welsh myth, is that the English kings themselves took it on that it was their destiny to become Arthur and rule the entirety of the British Isles, which quite literally shapes the entirety of the English foreign policy until after World War II. Like that one decision to build Tintagel Castle, for example, shapes English history.
Yes.
Moving back to the plot from yet another tangent.
The plot.
This is like the last time that the first time Tripp came on when we was meant to talk about ghosts and we ended up talking about the secrets of the universe.
Same.
Yeah, same stuff. Yes, so all of the men were hanged, then cut down whilst still alive, castrated, dismembered, and beheaded, otherwise known as hanging, drawing, and quartering.
Am I right in saying that Guy Fawkes was actually already dead by the time he was taken down and his body was chopped up?
Yeah.
And isn't there a theory that like he jumped beforehand to kill himself? Or I'm sorry, execute himself away from?
There is a hypothesis that he did self-delete. I wouldn't be. The way he had withheld the names at that point, I don't think he would have done it. He seemed to we know he was fighting for the gentry essentially, but in his head he was fighting a proper noble cause. Like it's like any religious fundamentalist. He believed he was the hero of the story. So I don't think he would have done it.
But there is also a big difference that comes into when the noose is actually on you.
True. I don't know.
We're getting a bit close to the edge with the.
I don't know. We're all right. We're all right for for YouTube. If it was on TikTok, we'd be down.
We'd be gone. We'd be gone long ago if we were on TikTok.
Yeah,
but
no, but I mean, like people do have a different thought process of what's going on in your mind between like I can stick through this and like, oh hey, the game's up and I can do the extremely painful thing or the quick thing. And I'm imagining that he's probably seen the extremely painful thing once or twice, just because
it was
the
public,
English
wasn't it?
do that. So he was probably like, I don't want to do that.
What do we think of the I'm not seeing it on this specific source, but I know I've read it multiple times. What do we think of the the story where he was instead ripped apart by a horse? Like he not ripped apart, but so they tied 4 horses, one to each leg, and then like broke all his bones. Do we think that actually happened? I know it was a Mongolian thing to do, but
I think that's less likely to be true.
Yeah, I mean, because I know that happened in Europe, but like, was that still happening in England at that point?
Yeah.
Oh,
well, they were quite literally the stuff they did do was still was still quite nasty. I mean, I think I like the fact that there's no way any of them were still alive by the time they were beheaded. I mean, dismembered literally means they were going in, taking out organs one by one. Like, there's no way they were alive by the time they were beheaded. The last of it, the quarters were displayed for all to see and for birds to feast upon. According to accounts, all faced their fates bravely.
Yes.
Which is noble, which is like a noble romanticization of that. I don't think anyone goes into that bravely. Besides, like, I'm just going to be quiet until
it's over.
Yeah, and I'm not screaming. My body is. Also, I googled it. Hanging, drawing, and quartering was abolished in 1870. So,
where was the last time it was used though? Because like it was.
Yeah.
A lot of these laws are just sort of left in place.
That's the interesting one.
Yeah.
I suppose the other question is.
Oh, here we go.
Why?
They've actually if further down. If only I'd read further down on this source. Fawkes, by now brutalized, was spared further agony when his neck broke during his hanging, which killed him instantly.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, that kind of sounds like he did a little extra jump to ensure that one.
So
okay, the last one was in 1747. So.
Oh, right, as late as that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that would be...
Who was that?
Simon Fraser was the last person that it happened to. And he's got a pretty decently long Wikipedia article, and I'm sure that would be a side tangent for another time, something to look into.
That is
so the question is sort of like, why did he not become, or not just him, but all the plotters? Catholicism has a very long storied tradition of martyrs, people who die for the Catholic faith. So he didn't really become a Catholic martyr in a sense. I suppose he was in a de facto sense, but he didn't become a sort of Catholic hero across the Catholic world the way you might have expected him to.
I mean, the only people that revere him as heroes, I would say, are mostly internet libertarians.
Yeah, I mean, he's become a very he's a hero to a very specific group of modern people. But at the time, the plotters didn't become Catholic martyrs, really. Why do we think that was?
Nobody knows those other guys' names.
Yeah, the other even I and this is as growing up, this was a big thing I always looked into. Even I had to have the names there so I could make sure I knew them. Most of this was just a refresher for me, but the names, unless it's Guy Fawkes, I don't know the names. I think it's because of it might have been the political nature of it, or it might have just been that the story didn't spread. Maybe the English Catholics were ashamed of it and they didn't want to spread the story. The Spanish, there's no real way that the Spanish at the time could use it to galvanize another war because they'd just signed a peace treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing though is if you think about it, a lot of historical events will tag a name to a movement and forget everyone else that was involved. Say to relate it to the Napoleonic Wars, it's Napoleon went ravaging through Europe, and then when he went to Spain, the Duke of Wellington went to go stop him in Spain. It's it was the Duke of Wellington. Who were all his guys? What were the other? Was it just the Duke of Wellington? Did he do it by himself? Or are we going to ignore, the Prussians that were involved in this?
Oh yeah, the Battle of Waterloo. The Prussians are almost completely sidelined, even though the Prussians potentially had the signal. Were the killing blow to Napoleon.
People only remember, the Duke of Wellington. They don't even remember, Arthur Wellesley, So, I mean, I think it might have more to do with the way that humans do storytelling, where we have a movement, we have the face of the movement, and everyone else, all the B-list characters can just get sidelined to the, backup guys.
Yeah.
It will be Bob and Jeff and whoever. It was Guy Fawkes doing this. It was George Washington doing this. It was Henry IV doing this.
So this gives a bit more insight to why. So immediately after the plot's defeated, the story, especially for England, less so the other parts of the Union, which wasn't really a union at the time, which is that's an entire show on its own. It's how the Union evolved. But England's national story specifically was the fact that the plot had failed, and it became an amazing PR campaign for James and the Protestant government. So, look what the naughty Catholics did. They tried to take away your precious king. So this is then it's actually described by English Heritage as the mood was the same alongside the defeat of the Armada, which there was 12 from Philip during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, which to them it was basically taken as the sign that the English were favoured by God. To which I say, have you seen the weather? Actually, no. The rain helped. The rain quite literally helped us win Agincourt and Waterloo. So
the Armada.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, no, the British. Yeah, that's true. I take my joke back there. That's actually.
Well, I mean, if you go into the favored by God thing, it's you guys also had a third of the Earth's landmass at one point.
We don't talk about that. We'll get in trouble for that. I'm joking.
Oh, shame.
I understand. God might have liked it at one point.
I mean, we can talk about that, but actually, no. Go for it. Go for it. Defend the British Empire in 100 words. Less.
Do we get in trouble?
No, I'm joking. I'm just messing around.
Oh right.
I meant more. We'll get some spicy comments, but YouTube won't try and take us down for that.
Okay.
How do I know? Because I've tested that before, and a short one.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you something that the Gunpowder plot reveals, and the whole Guy Fawkes phenomenon is that when it came to writing narratives of the clash between Catholics and Protestants, the Protestants were 1,000 times better at propaganda.
Oh, a million, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's also the reason Protestantism exists as a whole, though, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's why the Protestants managed to succeed where the Huttites and Lutherans failed.
And if you are Catholic, and you've got a problem with that, you can draft a formal protest.
I know,
and you can go nail it to a door.
What could possibly go wrong?
I wondered where you was going with that for a second. I'm really worried.
So it's not. So yes, I mean the Gunpowder plot is one. I mean, if you think about sort of so many clashes or episodes in history, the Protestants are always the goodies, and the Catholics are always the baddies in one form or another. In the propaganda.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that's the truth. I'm saying that whatever it is. I mean, like for example, Edward Gibbon's view of the fall of the Roman Empire is a very sort of anti-Catholic view of why it fell.
He essentially blames the rise of Christianity for the fall of the Roman Empire, which I would argue prolonged the Roman Empire.
Well, but specifically the church.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by that. So, and his sort of thesis on why Rome fell was probably the most influential for God knows how long, and still remains influential to this day. And the Spanish Inquisition as well is one that I think, I mean, it's a whole separate topic about the Inquisition, but it is only viewed in this sort of like almost sort of maniacally evil thing, with no understanding of context, with no understanding of sort of what was going on in Spain at the time. A lot of that was due to Protestants who were writing about it.
It's the same like as we've had all through history with the Roman senates and that, where like depending on the emperor, depending on the person writing, they're either an amazing emperor about like Commodus. I will stand by Commodus. He wasn't that bad an emperor.
Yeah, agreed.
All he did was do the exact same stuff, the baseline every other emperor did. The only crazy stuff he did was like become a gladiator.
It was a bit weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing on that though, and the 2-pointer on that. First off, when people look at the Spanish Inquisition, they fail to put into perspective that Spain is Europe's Alabama, and shit's gonna happen when.
Elaborate on that one. I've heard that France is the Ohio of Europe. Aidan Mattis famously said that France is the Ohio of Europe.
Well, I could see it with
sure
France.
What that means.
I'll go into that in a minute.
Okay.
I'm not sure what words I'm allowed to say. Let's just say the stuff that happens at the aristocracy level, as far as
I get
where you are in the blood pool, you marry, happens at the
Spain,
bottom level.
I get
how
Spain is Alabama.
Right.
I get how Spain is Alabama. Yeah.
And the thing with the Roman Empire falling due to Christianity, you have to remember that the Romans killed Christ, and God punished them by turning them into Italians.
This is why your last YouTube channel got taken down.
I know. It's all making sense France, now.
Though, they're and this one's less satirical. A lot of people see France as the cultural center of Europe, but don't put into perspective where its geography is. So if you look at Western Europe, France is the crossroads between Spain, Italy, Germany, and England. So anything that's going from England to Italy, if it's not going to go the long route, they're going to hop to France first and go through. Anything going from Germany to Spain, they're going to go through France. So France isn't this big cultural center because the French are great. It's because everyone's going through and dropping their ideas off on the way to wherever they're going next.
The same as Ohio was just in the middle of everything. So it's the cultural. Yeah. Okay, that analogy. I understand that analogy now. Back again to the plot. Perfect timing with the fireworks going off. In January 1606, Parliament passed an Act for a public thanksgiving to Almighty God every year on the 5th day of November, making it mandatory for every church in England to hold a special service on the 5th of November each year, at which attendance was at least in theory compulsory. Many sermons were struck directly with an anti-Catholic tone.
Yeah.
So it's
well, I mean,
yeah.
Also, if you're doing anything Protestant anyway, like, isn't that kind of the point of Protestantism, where it's like, listen, you can go talk to God. You don't need this intermediary middleman. You don't need the priest to talk for you. You can go do it. Also, don't give money to Rome. Give it to me.
Yeah, it's basically the libertarianism of religion. It's like, we don't need someone to tell us what to do. We don't need a hierarchy.
Yeah, but the point too to that though is, like, don't give money to Rome. Give it to the Church of England, aka
the Church
the
of England isn't necessarily Protestant. It's slightly different.
I don't think you understand what Protestant means.
I got told the Church of England isn't. I got told by
No,
someone
it
in the
is.
Church of England it said it wasn't Protestant.
Church of England is very much Protestant.
Am I being?
Yeah, like the whole like not being Catholic thing is the metric on.
I'm afraid that,
very hard
that I reckon that person was secretly a Catholic who told you that.
No, the Church of England, it's not Protestant. Like it's kind of not Protestant. You should go and then just maybe give Catholicism a try.
Yeah, go and then you could swear an oath to this guy called the Pope. What could go wrong?
You could take the. Have you tried these wafers? They're delicious.
Yeah. By the way, a lot of this sort of like you say, the anti-Catholic feeling. Sort of, I just mentioned Protestant propaganda. It wasn't necessarily wrong, in that both Protestants and Catholics at this time, like I said earlier, were perfectly capable of treating the other atrociously. So the fear of Catholicism, if you were Protestant, may well have been very real. Yeah.
Which ironically probably spurred on more atrocities, which would make the Catholics fear the Protestants, which would spur on more atrocities, which would make
right.
And then like, you look at like any point in history, like friggin', because the social elites are saying, hey, you got to do this, we got to do this. They'll spur on whatever zeitgeistal fucking ideas you have, but people will adopt that on the lower level and think they're doing it for God or their country or XYZ or whatever, without thinking that they're doing it for money bags over here. So
chunk of history, people were happy to go and bleed out in some random field in East Germany because they believed they were fighting on behalf of their king and God, who was clearly on the side of their king. Because why wouldn't he be? Because the king.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Germans just being Germans and sauerkraut existing. But
But I think we are coming to the end of the stuff now. Yeah, the play. Here we go. The 5th of November is observed exceedingly well in the city, and at night great bonfires and fireworks. A year later, Samuel Pepys. Yeah, in 1660, parliamentarian and diarist Samuel Pepys, who was very, very famous under the reign of Charles II. Pepys went to Dolphin with his brother and a friend, where they sat late, drank much, and seeing the boys in the street fling their crackers. In 1673, up until the 19th century, some crowds have paraded an effigy of the Pope through the streets. I didn't know about this one. Strung up above a bonfire. This has symbolised continuing prejudice towards Catholics. Yeah, it sounds more like against the Pope directly. However, during the French Revolution, English and Irish Catholics fought for Britain, which was found itself on the same side as the Pope. That's just because everyone was against republicanism, which led to the rise of Napoleon. And perhaps because of this, around 1800s, Guy Fawkes seems to have finally entered the picture as the bogeyman of Bonfire Night rather than the Pope. Fawkes was barely mentioned at 5th November sermons in the 18th century, and his name doesn't feature in the titles of books or tracts before 1800. But after this date, his name begins to appear, and Fawkes seems to have quickly become a central character in English popular culture, often portrayed as a dashing, doomed anti-hero. And then it just goes on to modern-day Guy Fawkes celebrations.
I'll tell you that has a few reasons, I think, for it. So a lot of our sort of cultural understanding comes from the Victorians.
Yes.
And as you said there, it's the 1800s when he becomes the central figure of the story. And by the way, the King Arthur thing as well. The Victorians really liked King Arthur.
And Boudica. Victorians brought Boudica to the forefront.
Absolutely. So the other thing is, I think one of the reasons it changed from the Pope to Guy Fawkes is because the Pope just wasn't the enemy he used to be anymore. So whilst you're having religious conflict in the 17th and 18th century, the Pope is this sort of he's the real enemy. But by the time you have the 1800s around in the 19th century, the Pope just doesn't elicit the same emotion anymore. So
the other thing, though, too, could it have been possible if this, popped up during the Victorian era, that someone wrote a novel about it, and that kind of became like a cultural thing? So, like, kind of like like a Darth Vader figure. Like, Darth Vader's not a real guy, but the idea of Darth Vader being the bad guy, enters.
As a kid, I always wanted to dress up as Darth Vader all the time.
I did, yeah. So Walter Scott had a lot of responsibility for a lot of our misconceptions of history because of the way he wrote his novels. So I don't know if he wrote specifically about Guy Fawkes. I don't think he did, but you could be right, and it could be an author. I know he's pre-Victorian, but I see your point.
Well, authors throughout history have been like, one of the main reasons we're still obsessed with Atlantis is because that was written by Plato or Socrates. Plato, wasn't it? Which is, if you want to go and see my interesting discussion on Atlantis with Ada Mattis, you can go and click the link in my channel. A little plug for myself there. Speaking of plugs, we will be plugging Tripp's book and History of All's channels as well. Even though YouTube is determined to keep him demonetized. Have you got any progress on that, fighting the demonetization?
Precisely zero. Precisely zero. I've supposedly reused content, but they won't tell me what I've reused. And the fact that my face and voice are in every video apparently is not good enough.
So they're annoyed at you for reusing yourself, is what they're saying.
Yeah, I've reused my own face.
Copywriting yourself, man.
Yeah.
It couldn't be that YouTube was upset about the stuff you were talking about. It couldn't be that.
I know that definitely not the reason.
Especially if it's purely educational.
Yeah.
Purely.
But that is basically with Guy Fawkes. We have the modern celebrations, which is in 20th century, the 5th of November has become much more family friendly event. I don't like that description because they say that for a lot, but family friendly 200 years ago would be a public execution. Like the whole family friendly thing.
The good old days.
It's just changed over time. I don't like the fact when people go, it's much more family friendly now. So it's just our sensitivities have changed.
Yeah.
Like we're much more. People say we're a lot more desensitized to violence because you can quite literally see videos of a lot of stuff online.
Yeah, and we're not, by the way, because we're desensitized to violence we see on a TV screen. But 200 years ago, if you lived to the age of 10 and didn't see 5 dead bodies at least, you were an extremely privileged, fucking individual. And now it's like the first dead person you see is like when you go to your great grandma's funeral or your aunt or something like that. Not, oh, this guy got mauled by a horse trying to put a shoe on the wrong way.
I mean, on top of that, the only people in society that would have probably been able to escape seeing such horrors would have been aristocratic women, because even the men would have had to go and fight, and the women would get to sit back. So they would be like the very few people. This isn't me doing like before the feminists get mad at me. They had a rough time. I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying that they would just
a fact.
They would have got. They probably would have managed to avoid seeing as much bloodshed. But yeah, back from the tangent again to finally finish this off, and then we can do our closing thoughts of was he the good guy. But yes, so it's common to see fireworks wearing Guy Fawkes masks, which they don't. They do talk about V for Vendetta briefly, but yeah, the Guy Fawkes masks are entirely from V for Vendetta. It's not actually Guy Fawkes, which is interesting how that film. We'll probably do a little detour just before we finish the.
And again, that's the idea of the guy, not the guy himself.
Yeah, it's V for Vendetta is entirely the anti-authoritarian idea that Guy Fawkes has coalesced throughout modern history. As late as the 1950s, it was uncommon for bonfires to spring up on the streets. It wasn't uncommon for bonfires to spring up on the streets. Particularly in bomb sites. That's typical British behaviour. Oh, we've been bombed by the Germans. Should we light a bonfire? People used fireworks to cause a nuisance in back alleys and city streets, but on the whole, 5th November has now been tamed, stripped of its religious meaning, and since the 1990s has been somewhat overtaken by Halloween as the UK's premier or autumn celebration. I would disagree.
Oh, I don't know about that. Yes, I think I strongly disagree with that.
But I don't even decorate the house for Halloween anymore. I barely celebrate. I used to be when I was younger, but I would say Guy Fawkes is like Bonfire Night is much bigger than Halloween. I don't know what it's like in the States.
But also outside of Ireland, friggin' Halloween is a kid's holiday.
Yeah, it never used to be. The Law Lodge just did a 2-hour-long video on Halloween and like its evolution. The level of research those guys do, I could never 2-hour videos. I couldn't.
This is not a Wendigoon video.
Yeah, Wendigoon's like 8 hours. His videos.
Yeah.
That's why he does like one video every 6 months. In many ways, Guy Fawkes has slipped out of the picture. It's bonfire and fireworks, not forks, which form the centerpiece of most community celebrations. Lewes remains a notable exception. Thousands of people flocks to the town's elaborate effigies every year. For everyone outside of the UK, Lewes, I think it's not Lewes, it's Lew. How do you?
I think it's Lewes.
Yes, Lewes. Yeah, the town of Lewes. If you look up videos of it on YouTube, you will find they are taken down very quickly. Because
it's so sad that they do that. It's like, just have some understanding that this existed long before any negative connotations came in later.
It's very similar to some of the Italian the dresses they have, because it connotates to and no offense, Tripp. This is a lot of the reason this gets taken down is because Americans get offended by it. It's very no offense, Tripp.
Not me.
But yeah,
I'm not pressing report.
The town of Lewes is their Guy Fawkes display has. I recommend, if you can find, you'll probably have to look on like Rumble or something like that.
I think you can describe it. I think it's okay to describe.
Well,
it's your choice.
I'm trying to think that there is a lot of religious symbolism with it. You will see a lot of crosses. You'll see a lot of fancy dress. Some of that fancy dress is in today's day and age not considered politically correct.
Yeah, I mean,
it's white suits with a big pointed hat.
No, that's
not quite. Not quite.
Europe has people with pointed hats.
But
that for religious celebrations, we don't. But yeah, Lewis is. It is a fun thing, but I'm trying to refresh. Hang on, wait. Let me.
Yeah, just leave it if it's.
I'm trying to figure out a way to describe. Let me find one costume I can just show on screen.
I mean, I thought the issue was what they did with the crosses, but
no, I haven't heard it. The thing I heard was that some of the outfits looked a bit like a certain doll that was sold in England a long time ago.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even though it long predated that.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah. That was the thing I heard, that it was. I love her. Tripp's like, I don't understand. What is this doll? What is this? I'll tell you afterwards. What it was. Yeah, I've got the picture of the costume that offended everyone up. Yeah, I can see it. So what's the issue with the crosses? Because I haven't heard that one.
They might be on fire.
Oh, okay. Why, as someone who's out of the religious circles, why would that be considered offensive to?
Well, certain people in the south of the United States might have burnt crosses.
I see. Okay, so there's a connection. Okay.
Of course, but the reason they burn the crosses is to signify Protestant martyrs who were martyred long before America was even before America existed. So it's
okay. So it's a lot of from what we've roughly
it's a lot of old world practices which were fine, and then different people in a completely different time and context made them unacceptable.
Yeah. Which is that's the world over now,
Afraid
unfortunately. So. Not to sound like a 50-year-old boomer going, the West has fallen. That is the truth. This which it's weird that that we've both had two different the version of what I was told the Lewis parade was naughty was different to yours, which just goes to show how much people don't listen to history and put their own spins of it. That there's two completely separate things that you can find that people haven't taken issue with. But my favourite part of that. Sorry, go on.
So I was going to say, should we do a hero or villain?
Should we do the V from Vendetta bit first? Because
go for it. Yeah.
So just to quickly go, like, so Lewis does break the cancel culture in a way because literally thousands flock to Lewis every year,
and it's great. You look at it; it's a really great event.
Yeah, I do plan to go at some point. I know Phil went there. I can't remember his TikTok username. The guy who does all the different towns, Newgate, went there. And because TikTok is so strict, he had to censor it. Sadly. But so Fawkes refuses to fade away entirely. In the 1980s, writer Alan Moore and illustrator David Lloyd gave Fawkes a new lease of life as the anarchist hero of the graphic novel V for Vendetta, which would be made into a film in 2005, starring Natalie Portman and who played V? I can't remember his name.
Hugo Weaving.
That's the one, Hugo Weaving.
King of the Nerds.
Which would mean that the nursery rhyme, or like the regular rhyme, would be which everyone in the UK knows as remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Takes on an entirely new meaning.
I know, completely.
Treason, which that rhyme is entirely about treason. And it takes on it's literally now chanted as a call for freedom because of that film. And I think we'll close off with that of how interesting is it that one graphic novel and a film can change the image, because I think that's the key reason that Guy Fawkes is now seen as an anti-hero, is V.
Agreed.
Folk heroes have a lot more power than we want to give them credit for, but they're
similar to
Guy Fawkes. We think of William Wallace, the idea is more powerful than the man was ever themselves.
Oh yeah.
And on that note, now because the V Vendetta, there isn't much to go over. It's just the comparison of how it's turned hit him into an anti-hero. So, Guy Fawkes, hero, villain, or misunderstood historical figure? What are we thinking, guys?
Go on, Tripp. You go first.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this with, as an American, there was a plot to blow up Parliment. I see no fault in his actions.
Fair play. And history, how are we going?
I certainly go for villain.
Fair. What are the reasons?
So the reason is, trying to blow up the king and Parliament, sort of act of mass murder like that. Not only bad enough in of itself, but I think it would have been a disaster for England or the British Isles or the Great Britain to go back to being Catholic. I think we've done much better as a country being a Protestant country. So I think had history gone in a different direction at that point because he'd been successful, I don't think we'd be in a good place. So I'm very much describe him as a villain.
Yeah, the ensuing civil war that would have came after that would have also stunted England's development.
Absolutely,
for at least several decades.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So even a successful Catholic takeover would have had Britain in civil war for God knows how long. What about what does History Daddy think though?
I'm gonna be that one guy who's gonna go. I think he's a misjudged historical figure. I think because I do have the image of him being a hero, but I also have the self-awareness to understand that it's a very incorrect image to have, because he was a terror spaceist who was essentially a religious fundamentalist, and who was trying to create what would have been the most successful attacks on England. Like, I don't think we actually even in our timeline have had anything that's bigger. So it probably wouldn't have been beaten.
But on the individual liberty part of this, though, all of the targets were politicians.
I can't comment publicly on that. I will not comment publicly on my views of the lives of politicians. But yeah, as far as I consider, 50% on the poll went both ways for hero or villain.
Oh, I like that.
Really? What's your audience demographic? To your knowledge?
it's mostly English and American.
And mostly our age.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's
yeah.
but
That checks out.
to be fair, I probably should have given them the third option. But
Oh no. A good black and white hero or villain is great.
Yeah,
it's all one way or the other. Listen, we're doing this for the algorithm. We're doing this for the views. It's got to be controversial.
Yeah, we've got to be controversial, and I think that does sum it up. But yeah, finish off. Quickly read some of the comments. They used to burn them. Okay. Yeah. That's talking about the crosses. Yeah. I won't finish out. Yeah. Now I understand why it's the burning of crosses. I didn't realize that initially.
Oh yeah, no, that's the guy with pointy hoods that.
Yeah, that's the pointy hood people. That's why that's negative. Napoleon Bonaparte is in the chat apparently, and he claims that Guy Fawkes is definitely a hero. And then and Wolfgang asks, where is the third option in the chat? To be fair, that's mostly because I just forgot to say it. And also now we get some spicy 50-50 takes. But closing off, finish off briefly, if you want to quickly talk about your book, Tripp, and then we'll do closing statements.
Oh, yeah. I got a novel series that's military sci-fi. It kind of starts off in realism, and as it goes on, it blurs more into sci-fi. But, if you just Google Smokepitt Fairytales, I'll be there waiting for you. I also got an audiobook. I'm doing first audiobook's already done. I'm doing the second one right now, but I release every chapter on YouTube weekly. So if you want to keep up with that, just Google Smokepitt Fairytales or go to smokepittfairytales.com and all appropriate links are there.
Yeah.
All applicable links are there. So you don't have Instagram.
Links to both History Revealed and all of Tripp's socials are in the description. So for closing points, History Revealed, I'll let you close off.
Closing just about Guy Fawkes.
Yeah, just like final thoughts, and then obviously where people can find you and stuff.
So like I say, I thought he was very much a villain. Although I do encourage people to look at the whole story in its detail. Very interesting, both in what happened at the time and the wider context of the battle between Catholicism and Protestantism in Europe. And you can find me at history_revealed on TikTok and History Revealed on Instagram and YouTube. Please support me on TikTok because I'm banned for the second time in 2 weeks. I'm back. But the fact that I'm still alive on it is a miracle.
It's definitely nothing to do with mass reporting about you just reporting the factual elements of a certain conflict that we're not going to do.
Definitely not. Yeah, definitely not.
And Tripp, same question to you. Closing statements, your final thoughts on Guy Fawkes and where people can find you.
Well, I already did where people can find me, but on Guy Fawkes specifically, long term, I would say that he's probably a hero for the sole purpose of it gives you guys to get together every year at that special time of year where you all get together and you forget about your petty differences and you let off some fireworks and you have a few brews and you get together with your community. So long term, good guy.
Okay, I see. That's a fair point. I'd say, it's sort of similar to every story I hear about July 4th. One of my favorite stories was from Michael J. Fawkes saying he was out in the middle of sticks in America, and it was on July 4th, and he didn't know what he was going to do, and until he saw a boat with a bunch of he said white dudes with red hats on. So he obviously feared the stereotype, and they invited Michael J. Fawkes. They didn't have a clue who he was. And then they shared alcohol and they gave him food, and he said, and that's what's being American. So I think it's a very similar sort of thing. But it's good to have those collective things. My final thoughts on Guy Fawkes would be similar. I do think the overall message that he's become, especially the sort of V for Vendetta stuff. I mean, he's obviously linked closely to the Anonymous, although Anonymous has sort of disappeared as time's gone on there. They seem to be much more government.
For you next.
Yeah, they seem to be much more government controlled than when I was younger. But I would say the image of like anti-authoritarianism that he has now is a very good thing. But the man himself was a religious fundamentalist who not every single politician is going to be a bad person. Most of them, but not all of them. So yeah, that would be my final thoughts. But yeah, to everyone watching, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope if you've still got time, it's only 8 o'clock, so there's definitely still time for you to all go out and get drunk, as is the British way. But yeah, I will hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. And thank you to both my brilliant guests for coming on.
Bye bye.
And we have ended the stream. There we go.
Cool.
Wow, total